Good evening, this is Mr. Wintermelon. So you have learned the organ generating the force and pressure propelling the transport system in our body. So now it is time to learn about the route which the transport system or the transport network travels on, which is our blood vessel. First, let us look at the objective. We need to relate the structure of arteries, vein, and capillary to their function. So bulk of this video will be on the first objective. Now, there will be a lot of the slide on this, but fear not, you do not have to copy down those slides because I have a table which neatly summarizes all of them. Next is to describe the transfer of material between capillaries and tissue fluid. And lastly, you need to be able to identify some of the main blood vessels going from the heart to the lung, liver, and kidney. And you might already be familiar with the blood vessel transporting blood to our liver. So there are 5 types of blood vessel. First is the arteries, followed by arteriole, which is a fancy way of saying smaller arteries. Next is the veins, venules, which is a fancy way of saying small veins. And lastly, the blood capillaries. So for artery and arteriole, their structure and function is around the same. The same can apply to veins and venule. For our arteries, their function is to carry oxygenated blood away from our heart. So how do you remember artery? A for artery, A for away. So artery carry bloods away from our heart. It is worth noting that there's one artery that carries deoxygenated blood away from our heart, and that's called the pulmonary artery, which you probably have heard of it before because it is used to carry deoxygenated blood from our heart into our lung. The lumen of the artery, or the hole in the middle, is relatively small compared to the lumen of the veins. The wall of the artery is thick and elastic. This is to withstand the high blood pressure, as well as to recoil and stretch to push the blood along. There are smooth muscles surrounding the artery, and they can contract and relax, constricting or dilating the size of the lumen, therefore controlling the blood flow. So after arteries, the blood will travel into the arteriole, and between the junction of the arteriole and the capillary, some of the blood plasma will flow out and it will form tissue fluid. So tissue fluid is formed because the blood pressure in the arteriole is higher than that of the capillary. Therefore, the blood plasma is being forced to leave the capillary and enter our body tissue. This fluid actually surrounds our cells, and there are exchange of material that is going on. As plasma proteins are too large to pass through the holes in the capillary, they are stuck in our blood vessel, which is actually a good thing. However, smaller molecules such as oxygen and dissolved food such as glucose are able to diffuse into the tissue fluid before entering our cell. So tissue fluid, as you can imagine, is just the liquid that is surrounding our cell. Oxygen and food will diffuse from the capillary into the tissue fluid, while waste will diffuse from the cell to the tissue fluid before entering the capillary. For the structure of our blood capillaries, their function is to connect arteriole to the venules. They carry blood to and away from our cell. The wall of the capillary is 1 cell thick and is partially permeable. That means there are tiny pores in the wall of the capillary. This is to facilitate rapid diffusion. The lumen is only one cell thick, so it will only allow one single red blood cell to squeeze through. Therefore, the blood flow is slow in the capillary. Capillary is also highly branched, and this is to increase the surface area to volume ratio, which will allow it to deliver blood to all the cells in our body. The blood will reach the venule before it reaches the veins. So structure of veins and venules, like I said, is the same. They carry deoxygenated blood towards our heart. There are smooth muscles surrounding the veins, which will contract and compress the vein to push the blood towards the heart. The lumen of the vein is relatively bigger than the lumen of the arteries. However, vein is less elastic and has less muscular wall. These result in a lower blood pressure as compared to the arteries. The low pressure is also due to the vein being further away from the source that is generating all the pressure pumping the blood around our body, which is our heart. And due to this low pressure, there is presence of valves. The presence of valve will prevent the bad flow of blood, as you can see in the GIF on the right. So the smooth muscle will contract, pushing the blood towards our heart. However, when the smooth muscle relaxes, the blood will flow back down, as you can see right at this corner. Now, when the blood is flowing down, the valve will close to prevent the backflow of the blood. So let us take a look at the comparison. As we mentioned about the lumen, the one on the top left hand side is a artery, while the one on the bottom right hand side is the vein. So you can see the pink color part is the muscle, the white color part is the lumen. The wall of the artery is relatively thicker than the wall of the vein. However, the lumen of the vein is relatively larger than that of the artery. Finally, let us recognize some important blood vessels. When it comes to lung, the artery and the vein going towards and away from the lung is termed as pulmonary artery as well as pulmonary vein. Pulmonary artery will transport blood away from the heart to the lung, while pulmonary vein will transport blood from the lung into our heart. Next, we have hepatic, which is referring to the liver. You might be familiar with the term hepatic portal vein. Hepatic portal vein transport blood directly from the small intestine into our liver. So if you look at the diagram carefully, you will see there's no direct connection between the small intestine or any vein from the small intestine to the heart. It is important for the small intestine to transport the absorbed nutrients straight away to the liver, because liver is in charge of detoxification. If the blood flow directly to the heart, there might be severe consequences if those toxic is not being detoxified. And finally, renal refers to the blood vessel going towards as well as going away from the kidney. Renal artery away from the heart and into the kidney, while renal vein transport blood away from the kidney towards our heart. Last but not least, this is the table for you to copy down. This table is very comprehensive. It mentions about structure. So you can see that artery, their wall is thick, elastic and muscular, while the wall of capillary is one cell thick and vein is relatively thinner and less muscular. There is also comparison of the diameter of the lumen, as well as valve, whether it's present in artery, capillary, and vein. The direction of the blood flow for artery is always towards the heart. Capillary connects the arteriole to the venous, therefore it transports blood from the arteriole to the venous, while veins transport blood towards the heart. For arteries, the blood here are mainly oxygenated, while the vein is mainly deoxygenated. The blood pressure in the artery is the highest, while the blood pressure in the capillary goes from high to low, and vein has the lowest blood pressure. So similar to the speed of flow, the blood flow rapidly in the artery, but slowly in capillary and vein. So this will be all for the lesson on blood vessel.